Are we supposed to be quiet?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're supposed to be quiet.
Yeah, you don't want people to hear this part.
Oh, okay. It's just confusing that form, isn't it?
Yes, very confusing.
When you were telling Mark and I to quiet down, they're just like, we don't need to quiet down. It's okay. We can have this nonsense banter.
No, we're telling them secrets.
About our nonsense banter, and Mark and I are like, what? We're supposed to be quiet? The producer's asking us to be quiet, and we are not going to be, because we think it's funny. Because who wants dead air? This is our podcast right now. It's live.
Let's see.
That's our thumbnail. So wait, can you hear us now?
Yeah.
On how much of a delay?
A few seconds.
A few seconds? Okay. That's weird.
All right, guys, we are here. Thanks for joining us this Thursday for another live stream. It's something we really enjoyed doing. This is going to be the new format of our podcast moving forward. If you haven't checked out the first 20-something episodes, you can find them pretty much anywhere you can find your podcasts. So we're going to be going video from now on. So first things first, though, here at the Crank Revolution Bike Shop in Hoffman Estates, we have our new mountain bike jersey.
Party camo.
Party camo, very bright, very bright. But what you're probably here for today is I challenged you guys last week. I said, you know what? You're gonna wanna fight me, but I'm gonna say the very best upgrade you could ever make for your bike is wheels. Would you agree with that?
Well, so this wheel generates electricity.
Okay, so there's a lot of different things you could do.
That's a thing that it does.
It actually generates electricity.
By rolling. So this is a Sun Dynamo hub, and this generates electricity while you ride and can power headlights, taillights, USB chargers, just anything that you would kind of want to add. So yeah, that is, I mean, wheels are kind of cool because you can do a lot with them. Well, and you can build them from, hub, spokes, and rims. So this is the one last week that I showed everybody that, I said I was going to build. So this is that finished wheel with a tire and rotor now on it. We've got the bike wired up over there. So yeah, this is kind of where wheels end up.
So we're going to talk about wheels. So there's a couple of things you have to kind of identify first. And I will say it is the greatest upgrade regardless of bike or whatever you're going to ride. And the reason I say that, first of all, remember you can always, on whatever platform you're on, YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook Live, ask us questions in the chat and we can answer them right here for you. So the first thing you have to figure out, what are you going to do with your wheels? What are some different types of wheels that you can build?
And that's the fun thing. So as someone who has built a number of the wheels that are on display behind us, including the center one, so that one there, that's the first wheel that I ever built. And it's the only wheel I've ever built that's a one cross lacing pattern. And that was
meaning what? They just cross?
Significant compromise, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a singular cross between the spokes. And so it's a weird way to build a wheel. But so what's nice about building custom wheels is it is whatever you want.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to get out of it, whatever you want that wheel to be. I've got a gentleman on Saturday who's bringing in his wheels that he has, and he wants the loudest pulls that we can find. And I don't know what's the correct answer yet, because I haven't. They unfortunately don't sell them based on decibel at certain
Right.
RPMs. But we're going to figure out whatever he wants it to sound like.
Well, here's how I know that TC likes loud rims. By us, there is a ski jump hill. So we like to do some climbing training, instead of you don't buy upgrades, you ride upgrades. We can go around and around. Now, he does a lot more laps than I do in the same period of time, but I can always tell when he's lapping me, when I can start hearing that Chris King buzz come around the back.
That one.
Can you hear that? And that sounds a lot better under load,
Yeah, under
too.
load,
Yeah.
and when it's not brand new.
But so here's what I'll say. A lot of people want to build wheels for speed, which is perfectly valid. You can make them lighter. Climbing wheels will be a little different than, say, aero wheels. But there's a lot of things you can do. Can you benefit from building your own mountain bike wheels?
Absolutely.
What are some things you would gain there?
It's orange.
It's orange, custom.
So what's nice about kind of the custom built of things is whatever you want it to be. So this is one that actually we did for a e-bike, where the rider wanted to change the color of everything.
Oh, yeah.
And so we got Chris King orange anodized boost hubs, and it's ones where it's weird when you have two different people anodize things, but it's basically a perfect color match to the Velocity Cliffhanger orange rim. And so this is just a nice classic kind of as brightly colored as we can get it. But yeah, in my history of building wheels, I have built a lot.
You have.
A lot of weird stuff, too.
Yeah, he's built a lot of wheels from over the years. As a matter of fact, that first wheel he ever built, I rode for years and years and years. It was pretty good.
And so what's nice about this one, so this is very much purpose-built, but more for aesthetics than for for pure performance. However, performance is truly built in because custom-built wheels, because we take them one spoke at a time and kind of build everything together, we get a very even spoke tension across the wheel. So it's the strongest version of a wheel. Just in how it's the steps to construct it, but then also with this one we went to. Let me just look at it because I built this wheel about a year ago, and so this is a 3-cross. So 3-cross straight gauge. So this is a very 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 robust setup for this wheel, based on rider weight and an e-bike where you want a little bit more strength and durability.
Well, the thing I just thought about in my head is sometimes it's about performance and the mechanical aspects of how it works. This is very similar to Fast and Furious, tuner style cosmetics. So you can really do it. I think in the bike world, people don't realize you can customize every single part of your bike, whether it's color, feel, you can name it. So there's a lot of things you can do. What's some other wheels here that you've built?
So there's another one that I built. And so this one was a fun and interesting build. So we have a i9 Road Classic through axle hub in lime green, which is a very pretty color. But you got to have the right color bike and the right kind of style for that.
And not be red-green colorblind like I am.
Yeah, but so decently loud hub. We'll do the spin test. I guess we'll call that at this point. Decently loud. These definitely get better with age. But so this is nice deep dish head carbon rim.
Yeah.
Super high end spokes. These are DT Aerolite. And that's there's so many little
Do you have a year of vintage on that? Is it?
And so I like how last week where I was going through the spokes that I had on hand, and it's oh, this is a Wheelsmith. It's because one's no one cares.
Right.
What spokes? Spokes are spokes, but for
the
us,
people in the know, it's like a
for
good
us
line.
wheel build nerds. Yeah, it's you're either a Sapim guy or you're a a DT Swiss friend. And you have your spokes that you go to, and it's nonsense because everyone makes the same spokes. Just sometimes you've paid.
So the purpose of this one would be just more aero.
So this is your because it's also a tubular rim. So as opposed to clincher, opposed to tubeless, this is a tubular. So we glued this tire on. So this is, I have not weighed it, but this is kind of the lightest version of a through axle disc brake wheel that I've ever built.
And if someone's confused for a minute, tubular, literally imagine an inner tube, how it's circular all the way around stuff. That's what the tire is itself that gets glued on.
Old school sew-ups. This is, tubulars were very, very popular for racing in the 70s. And they have gone out of vogue because clincher and tubeless systems have gotten that good.
Yeah.
Where they're 90, 95% of the way there with so much easier serviceability. Anytime you get a puncture on this, you get a flat on this, sometimes there is sealant in these. I don't know if this rider has that, but you have to glue a new tire on when that old tire is dead. and
Yeah.
take it by hand, and it's about a 3-day process to properly glue a tubular.
You don't love doing them. We
I
make
don't.
Merc do it.
I make him do it, yeah.
Well, so here's the thing I want you guys to do, and if you're like, oh my gosh, we're already nerding in the tech specs,
Yep.
Here's what I want to point out to you. There are cosmetic reasons, there are speed reasons, there's a ton of different things that you can do.
Utility reasons.
For your wheels. So the first thing you'd have to kind of choose, I think you can tell from some of these, you're basically, if you want to do a custom wheel build, whatever your thought process of why, you need to start looking at 3 different things.
So yeah, hubs, spokes, and rim.
So wheel size is probably the first thing you would look at.
Okay, is that where? Oh, that's
no,
where you're at. I mean,
you're
I was trying
right,
to
though.
think about your setup there.
Well, I'm just thinking, yeah. So,
but
if
your
you
wheel
want to build it, what do you need?
Yeah, and so the wheel size is whatever bike you have has a set wheel size. You don't want to change those. There are a few bikes in the market where they have wheel size options, but they're pretty rare.
Yeah.
And so yeah, overall, whatever wheel size you have is going to be kind of dedicated to what that bike is.
So 700 for road, 27.5, 26
and so,
or
I mean,
29.
these are like so, it's the bike industry is not fun, and the minutia, and so yeah, most common road wheel size is 700. 650C and 650B are also acceptable.
Yes.
Mountain bikes are 29, 36, 27.5, 26.
36.
Yeah, 36
Okay.
is a wheel size. 36ers are rare, but they still exist. So yeah, it's just nonsense, the bike industry. But so yeah, the wheel size is going to be inherent to the bike. So it's not something that you really get to kind of pick and choose when you're building a wheel. It's either you have a bike and frame and build in mind. And so yeah, wheel size, that's where you're at. But also what you're going to use it for, what you're trying to do. And so yeah, the lightest, fastest wheel.
Let's approach it that way. You're a wheel builder. I'm a customer. I'm going to come into you and I'm going to say, do you want to use a mountain or a road for this
It's your
example?
wheel.
All right, so I want to build a custom wheel for my specialized Olympic tarmac, meaning it's for the Olympics, for your Olympics. So I know it's going to be 700C. Now, my goals sometimes conflict if I'm a road rider. I might want a climbing wheel that's light, spins really fast, or I might want an aero wheel. So being that I live in the Midwest, what would be one of the things you'd look at for me?
So yeah, here in the Midwest, because we don't have a lot of elevation gain, a more aero wheel at a low weight is usually where most folks kind of end up. And so depending upon your rider and who you are, how much power you have is how deep do we want to go? How aero do you want to get? Because those aero gains really only come into play at 24, 22, these higher speeds.
Yeah.
If you are, in that 17 mile an hour average range, you don't want a super deep dish wheel. It looks cool, but you're just towed that weight around. It's not actually helping you. So you want to find that wheel that's kind of mated to your riding acumen, where you're at, what your riding.
Well, and there's more than that too, because we talked about the possibility of climbing, or so as a bike shop employee, you're identifying right away, most likely I'm going to want something that's aero. But there's two other reasons I run into that customers ask about building wheels all the time. When I got back into cycling and I met TC, I was 285 pounds. So my stock wheels on my Schwinn Voyager were breaking constantly. I was in there all the time. So you might go from what are some different spoke counts? Because this is an important consideration when you're buying hubs for your wheels.
And so when we say spoke count, what we're referring to specifically is the number of spokes that exist. And so that number is going to be mated between both the hub count and the rim count, because those are how many holes are in each. And so this wheel here, which is a much more very durable kind of a build, we are a 32 hole mated front, hub and rim, 32 hole, and then it's a 3-cross lacing pattern. So lacing pattern is one of the big things that kind of comes into play. That is, how much does the hub rotate? Where is how many spokes does this cross? So this spoke here, I hope you all can see this nicely. I hope I'm a nice backdrop. Crosses this 1, this 2, and this 3rd spoke, and this is that where they're actually physically crossed.
To be a strong wheel.
So that's 3 cross is one of the gold standards for strong and durable.
Sure.
2 cross is probably most common nowadays for mountain bike, through axle, disc brake stuff. And it's fairly light. Radial, which we might have your rim brake wheel somewhere that's probably radial. Yeah, your rim brake wheel is radial. Which is just straight shot from that spoke hole to the rim.
Right.
That is the shortest, the lightest, the least strong.
Sure.
Every time we go from radial to 1 cross to 2 cross, every time we cross, we get more, longer spokes that are stronger.
Well, this is why you should sit down with a wheel builder, because we've already identified as me as the theoretical customer. You can be aero, it could be a climber's wheel, it could be for strength. If you're a touring cyclist and doing what we talked about, it could be just different color. But there's another thing that comes down to it, and that's also price. Like we've seen anodized aluminum. So materials for wheels. So for frames, we have steel wheels. I'm sorry, for frames, we have steel, we have carbon, and we have alloy. What do you find these days? Do we still find steel wheels?
And so, thankfully, no. Steel wheels were terrible.
Why?
That was so that was the, at the time, that was the best. It was a solid material for it. So steel wheels don't have what's called a machine sidewall.
Oh.
So they didn't have a solid brake track. And they did have some where they manicured in this really odd checkerboard.
Like a dimpled, yeah.
And it doesn't work. And so anyone who's ridden a 70 Schwinn, which is the most common thing for us to talk about here in Chicagoland, the moment that it's wet out, you grab your brakes and you just slide. And the brakes are just a suggestion to maybe hopefully slow down. They're not actually this is going to help you. So yeah, steel wheels were notoriously bad in wet conditions for the lack of braking power.
Yeah.
So pretty much everything, nowadays the gold standard for most common for everybody everywhere is aluminum. Aluminum rims are, they're inexpensive. They're super solid. They're super robust, and they're they have designs now for every single concept of a wheel that you would. If you want aero, if you want deep, if you want shallow, if you want all of those exist.
So would you say then? So would you say most customers building a custom wheel set, which you build a lot, are going to choose between alloy and carbon?
Yeah. Those are the two kind of rim materials that we'll really talk about.
And then also, is that going to be true across all of them? Meaning gravel.
Oh man.
Mountain,
track. I love to say no to any infinitive question because there's all these little
right.
things. Yes.
Mostly,
I mean, very rare case. I can't come up with, and that's why I'm trying to come up with why I would do X. Besides for heritage or vintage enthusiast pieces, to do a steel wheel on that.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything today is going to be alloy or carbon. That's really.
Well, so we have a wheel set. So if you're going to sit down with your wheel builder, first thing, know what wheel size you're going to do. You can't go in there if you don't know that. Number two, what tire do you want to ride? Now, when I say that, let's take road for an example. I've noticed that my NV 5.6s that I have are optimized for a 26 millimeter wide to be perfectly aero. Can I run a 29?
Yes.
Or 28? Yeah.
Yep. As long as your frame accepts it. And so. Yeah, a lot in the aero world of things, and this has changed quite a bit just in the last 3 years.
Oh yeah. Wider is faster.
Wider is faster, but that tire profile helps. And now you've got behind us here we've got the Revolver Pede CLX2 rear wheel.
Nice.
I've got the front somewhere. It's great when you match up the front and the rear next to each other. The rims are significantly different.
Sure.
So that front rim is about 4 mil wider. And so it's wider to cut the air first, and then the rear wheel is tighter. So it's this whole rim design has really grown over the last few years.
So is that important to tell your wheel builder then, so that if you always ride 28s or say you want to run 30s, you should let them know?
So yeah, your tire choice, and especially you've had some brands where they talk about tire compatibility. So if you're Continental, I love Continental tires. This is what I ride, but this is what I want. There are certain brands that have, I think they've recently changed.
Yeah.
But at one point they were saying they were not at all compatible.
That's true.
So there's that. I mean, rim choice.
I'm a person who only runs one road wheel, I think, which is why he's thinking. Once you find your favorite tire, you kind of stick
that's
with
where,
it.
We talk about so much of this going to wheel tire systems, where everything's kind of getting integrated nicely. And so when planning a custom build, understanding the full extent of what we're going to be doing, what we're going to ride, how long, how far, how fast, how often, and what we're trying to get out of it. Understanding that from a build perspective is definitely kind of sets you on the path for kind of what choices you do have. Because if you go through everything that exists in this world, there's way too many options. I used to send out a form email when anyone asked me about building wheels, and it would have links that I kind of calculate if they had wanted to read through every piece of material that I sent them, it was 40 hours.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And it's hilarious because I've read all of these sites, all of this about these hubs versus that hub versus this rim versus that rim. And I kind of sent out I wonder who is actually reading and paying attention to all of this.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Because it's one sort of as someone who's a total wheel nerd,
there's a lot to know.
When you get into it, there's so much to know, and having experience with so many different options really kind of helps you to tailor exactly what wheel do you want, to try to make that work. Because I've built most anything that I can think of, and so it's just cool. What's going to be best for this? And that's why, this wheel here, is a rim that I personally toured with, that I'm super solid about. And for what we're doing for a loaded touring bike with electric generating capabilities, this is the most solid and yeah, just robust.
Well, when we talk about that too, generator hubs have been around a long time. In the old days, you had a little swing arm that would come down and actually touch the rim with the spinning.
Well, that wasn't necessarily a generator hub.
True. I mean, okay, so it had a generator on it. We talked about in our Wheels and Touring one that you'll find there in the back catalog. Solar, like I used to charge with solar. Looking at it now, if I didn't have to charge when I was away from the bike, I probably would go with a generator hub.
Yeah, it's one of those where, you know, it's hilarious how long ago that bike tour was. That was 8 years ago.
Are we aging? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we are, but at the same time, I've only been back in Illinois for 4 years. That's chaos.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, generator hubs at this point are super solid. You know, the because their pricing is maintained pretty constant, they seem fairly inexpensive at this point relative to what they used to be. And so, but they're, you know, their technology's gotten so much better. It's so much more efficient, so much less drag, so much, you know, it's very simple to build. But also, we do have I am very comfortable building wheels and finding this out. So
he throws them together.
I've been doing this for a number of years now, and it's a lot.
Well, so that's something to think about. So we looked at materials, we looked at size. Those are important things to know. Also, what tire or what type of terrain you're going to be on, what your goal is, whether it's weight management, whether it's something that's super reliable, because fast is not always reliable. The biggest thing that I think has changed for me when it comes into my wheels, I used to swap tubes all the time. I was a commuter, and I don't know, once a week I'd be going through an industrial park, pick up something and change it. I didn't feel great about road tubeless maybe 3-4 years ago, maybe 2017, 2016.
But now it is.
Now it is, and I've actually switched over to tubeless. Now the thing that I think most people don't realize when you're buying that bike, the wheels that come on the bike may or may not be tubeless compatible.
True. Tubeless compatible, tubeless ready.
So what does that really mean, though? Because I mean, what's the difference between a non-tubeless wheel and a tubeless wheel from a sense of?
So it comes to how is that rim produced and how is it sealed? So we've got a fat bike over there that we need to get some kind of nicer like tubeless tape or some kind of tubeless up because we run around tubeless, except that there are production holes across the rim. Yeah. That the nylon rim strip, which I think is tubeless ready, isn't going to cover. So the sealant is just going to drip into that rim and cause problems.
So if you take the tire off, you can actually see all the
you can
holes
see the holes
through the wheel, which isn't going to hold any liquid.
Nope, and it's not going to hold air. And so it's ones where it's how this rim's constructed and what it's kind of intended for.
Yeah.
You know, there are, especially early, 10 years ago, before tubeless was that prominent, we just put things together.
Sure.
We just tried. We used duct tape or Gorilla Tape.
I used Gorilla Tape one time to set up a tubeless, and I was like, "What am I doing?" But it works.
But it works, and it's one of those things where
was it reliable?
It's solid. It's worked, and I've used it in plenty. I've used it in high-end carbon stuff because it's what I had. But it's something where in that perfect world, you kind of have everything where it's sealed and tubeless ready. You throw your 2 layers of rim tape on there, and boom, you're good to go. And tubeless now, it is something where it's so solid, it's so consistent. That besides for taste and preferences, if it's up to me, I'm pretty much always going to recommend that we go tubeless.
Yeah, I don't have a reason not to. So those are the basics if you really boil it down to what to bring Wheel Builder and say, okay, what am I going to run? Look at those reasons, what materials. But let's look at this though. We have to choose spokes still. Yep. Now, what are some common, how many, say a climbing wheel, one designed to spin really fast, be incredibly lightweight, how many spokes are we talking?
So, the lightest I've ever heard of is 12.
Oh, no, not
And it was a fun because it was a guy building a wheel for somebody who is specifically for a hill climb challenge.
Yeah.
And it was up Pikes Peak. And
it only has to survive up.
Well, and that was the conversation of this wheel goes up. It doesn't.
You don't want to go 40 miles an hour on 12 spokes.
It will explode. And so, that's the lightest I've ever heard of.
Well, just think of a suspension bridge. If it's a 100-pound rider and there's 12 spokes, do the math. I mean, holy cow.
Yeah, it's not light.
No.
I mean, it's a lot of stress on each of those. So, most commonly we're talking, at this point with everything being disc brake has changed that. Where 2024 is kind of like the lightest that you'll see, generally speaking.
Oh, and that's a great point I didn't even think of. You have to really think about what technology is in quick release or through axle when you're choosing your hubs, which we haven't talked too much about hubs, but that is a big consideration too.
So rim brake and disc brake, have different wheel demands.
Right.
And so to help highlight that,
for people who don't know, let's show one of each maybe.
So this is Jeremy's NV56.
I missed you. It's been winter.
So that is that radial spoke pattern, that straight, straight
nice
shot.
And straight. right out to the outside.
So you can only do that with a rim brake setup because your tension when braking is here.
Right on the surface of the actual wheel.
When you go to a disc brake, where it's here and it's twisting the hub,
yeah.
you will just shear all of those spokes.
So if I was the caliper, I'm not going to actually grab your disc because you shouldn't do that. But if I were grabbing here, then the wheel wants to keep moving. So
that torsion's in the hub as opposed to in the rim. And so that's where, rim spoke lacing patterns for disc brake, minimum 2 cross.
I guess you didn't think of that. If you're grabbing it here and the bike is applying pressure to the rim, and you're pushing forward and your weight wants to go forward, you're pushing against the spokes too. That's a whole different demand than a disc brake. Learning things.
And so, there goes Mike Pack. And so the radial pattern, that super light rim brake version for that, that was what was as minimal as possible. But with disc brakes, it's just not possible because that braking pattern is going to just rip those spokes apart.
Okay.
So they need to be able to brace. They need to have that.
So really, when it comes down to choosing spokes, that is a big consideration then of what type of braking tech you have. And then would you say the weight of the rider? Like, should I be riding 24 spoke or maybe 32? Currently, in the off season, I'm at 230 pounds.
You have been. It's been fine, and that's so much of this and the weight restrictions that come down. A lot of companies 240 pounds for carbon setups. I've definitely know people that have with great success done more. But it's almost really the companies have to have a limit, and because you can't have just things explode. So what's your your weight can come into factors, but it's something where designing that wheel around you and what you want is so easy once we actually have talked about this and kind of started planning it, because it's something where you should not be on a 12-spoke rim.
No,
that's a pretty easy statement, but you don't want that wheel either because it's just going to go out of true.
Well, no. So I mean, once you choose the spokes, the number of spokes, there are different considerations for. Talk to your wheel builder for that. We've explored a little bit of that. I guess the other question I would have though. In choosing the hub itself. Now we talked about for touring a dynamo hub that actually generates electricity, caveat being there is a parasitic drain.
Well,
You're turning it so it's actually drawing away, but if you're touring, you don't care.
This doesn't have like a perpetual motion where it just generates electricity out of no cost.
Yes, perpetual motion is real.
We have solved it.
No, but that is something to consider. So generator hub, now more commonly, what people want from us, and I'm just going to throw some names. No one here is actually a sponsor or anything like that. You tend to ride Chris King, it seems. Although there's i9, which is also fantastic. Now on my Envies, I am actually using just the Envy stock hub in there. Now, are there any main tech differences? Forget through axle or quick release. What about the internal design? I'm sure they're all patented, but what are the biggest things you see internally on a hub?
And so that's where we started about how loud is your rear hub, things like that. And so rear hubs have however that free hub body, however that engages. And so this here, Chris King, is different from the Roval, which is the DT Swiss, which is different from the i9. And so that's, when we're talking about these more specific brands in terms of what hubs they're producing is, the patent technology about how this is, assembled, how this works is such a big deal. And so, Chris King uses a floating ring drive is one of the things they talk about. The i9s, I'm not sure exactly in that one, but it might be a 6-pawl system with many points of engagement.
There's so many different patents and technologies.
There's more than one way to produce a wheel.
VTech, just everyone's got a different name for the same one
of the things that you get with the higher end hubs is generally higher points of engagement.
Yeah.
And so what that is all of those clicks. Each time it's clicking, that is the engagement of the hub kind of resetting.
Well, and for those who aren't wheel nerds, here's the way that I always look at it when I see what he's doing there is, if I turn this just every little degree, I can feel another tick. It feels like one of those Swiss timepieces. But if you think about it, the reason it has to is if you're not pedaling, it has to be able to freewheel. But the second you apply forward motion, on some of the cheaper wheels I've ridden, you might actually pedal forward an inch before it starts to grab. Whereas that's going to feel like every degree has grab.
And that's where, those higher points of engagement, it's definitely a higher level of engineering. It's definitely, more demands out of it. But especially for something like mountain biking, where a lot of times you'll go from not pedaling to engaging.
I didn't even think of that.
You go to flat, and then you're like, oh, we got to climb up this rock, climb up this stump.
Right.
So that quick attack quick jump on the pedals to be able to get that rear wheel in place to pop a wheelie.
Yeah.
Higher points of engagement make that significantly
Well, I
easier.
didn't even think of that, because if you think about it, the ongoing joke on road is, well, my wheel is too loud. Well, why aren't you pedaling? Because if you're at a cadence, you're on a flat road, you're just turning. But on mountain biking, there are a lot of times you have to get flat just to clear, or because you don't want to pedal
strike.
through the corner.
There's a lot more kind of technical pedaling demands there.
Right.
And so having that higher point of engagement for mountain bike hubs makes a lot of sense, because it allows you to apply power more consistently with more control.
Well, we had the weirdest thing recently, since TC builds everything, as it says right there on our sign, we're a custom build shop. Everyone always wants loud or noisy. I like something in between. It's just that we're like "Rrr" sound, and it's funny. We should actually do a little symphony of all the different sounds for the podcast. But there was a weird one recently that you had that was zero sound. Stealth. Why would you want? Well, I guess if you want to enjoy nature, listen to the birds and not hear.
And so what that was a needle bearing drive from Onyx Racing.
Okay.
And so that was a hub that the rider really liked, that quiet bike.
Sneak up on
Because
people not
it's the anytime someone likes the loudest, someone's going to like the quiet.
That's funny, a stealth bike.
But what's really interesting about that hub is that it has, and we're talking about points of engagement. They talk about it's effectively infinite.
Wow. That's
so
crazy.
you always have direct power when putting it down. It is pretty high level engineering.
Sure.
They've been doing well with it. It's not an inexpensive hub by any means.
No, I can imagine it would be.
$450, $600, something like that for just the rear hub. And so but it's a very different, to ride a bike where when you stop pedaling it's
makes
silent.
no sound.
And that's what it's supposed to be, is weird. It takes some getting used to.
Well, I can't even imagine that.
And so that was on e-bike too. So that he's going to
that's super crazy and stealth. I mean, I guess there are reasons. Number one, not disturbing nature. If you're going through a nature preserve, you might not want to. You might actually hear nature
maybe.
more.
So hunters, they'd be able to get in there a little bit closer to the deer
in there
without the ratchet of the free hub.
Well, so that's another consideration, is how loud do you want to be? Matter of fact, you had a customer call today, just like, I want the loudest, and you're like, we can compare DT Swiss to Christine.
I got 4 or 5 ones here. We can take a look, and you tell me which one you want it to sound like. Because loud is, for some people, loud is the most points of engagement. Sometimes the actual decibel, how loud, there's a lot of different options here for what we're going to do.
Well, so here's the thing I was thinking of too. So if I was going to order one of these, number one, what I'm seeing here is we have to know the number of spokes. So that's how many holes are actually drilled in the wheel. This happens to be a through axle. Is that a 12 millimeter, it looks like?
Yep.
So we have a 12 millimeter through axle. And then the other consideration is, on your bike, is it SRAM, Shimano, Campy, XD? There's so many of these different terms. What does that really mean?
So that is, what is your free hub body? So that is how does the cassette, how does the rear gears, the rear gear cluster, how does that connect to that wheel? And so this one here, this is a Shimano Hyperglide free hub body.
I love that I can just reach back and grab random
also
wheels
a
off the
Shimano
wall.
Hyperglide free hub body.
Yeah, do we have any others?
We do. I know we've got a SRAM XD up front, but that's
we
on the
get
outside.
the idea. They're depending
Different
on the
shapes
system.
of those.
Different shapes, and that's going to determine what type of cassette you can put on there. So if you did have, say, a Campy setup, you were going to use a Campy cassette, you really can't have a SRAM Shimano free hub body.
True.
It's another consideration to bring to your wheel builder.
And so understanding.
Or just upgrade your whole drivetrain.
How
wireless, do it.
How your rear gear cluster, how that attaches to the hub. And so if it's Shimano, Shimano's got now, in the last 2 years now, we have 3 different versions. So there's Hyperglide, there's Microspline, and there's the new one, which it's like Hyperglide 2 or something.
It makes it so hard to stock
their nomenclature's
cassettes.
not easy. Yeah. Well, it also, not every manufacturer makes every single one of those. So if you are buying a Chris King hub, but they don't have the Hyperglide 2 free hub body compatible,
well, and sometimes, they have the adapters, and they have to get the adapter. So this is why, when you're going to custom build, this is a great time to have a whole conversation. Just sit down with the wheel builder to plan this out, because you can very easily take a fork and then be too far down.
Yeah, and you can kind of go down a path that's improper, because to get you got to get everything right. And, these are. They're not inexpensive. I mean, wheel build is kind of a involved process.
That's a good point. So, I mean, cost is one consideration. Like, I am perfectly comfortable having a $2,800. You heard it, $2,800 set of wheels for my bike. Now, that's not certainly the most expensive by any means. No. But here's the thing that I look at, and here's where I've gone down a rabbit hole. I said I had a 2015 Tarmac. That is a quick release setup. Pretty much every bike I buy in the future is through axle. Is there any way to salvage that moving forward? Well, could I have you rebuild it with a different hub?
Yeah, we could put a different hub into the rim, and that's their wheel builder who's comfortable with what they're doing looks at what you have and okay, what do we need to change to make this work?
Right.
But so one of the things that with your wheel specifically, wherever it went to, so it's a rim brake rim and a rim brake hub.
And they haven't made the tarmac and rim brake now in a couple of years?
For a couple of years, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's something where you can take that rim brake rim and you can build it up as a disc brake, but it's just to anyone that has the level of staring at bikes,
right.
like, why do you have a rim brake?
So sometimes buying for the technology you have, it is smart to look at future tech as well.
Yeah, and that's where right now we're looking at new drivetrains coming in, new kind of bunch of different small adjustments. But what's nice is that in both the mountain bike world and the road bike world, 142 by 12 and 100 by 12 for the through axles. What?
Just realized now you got to think about the spacing.
Well, yeah, but
there's
that's
boost.
but that's road bikes and gravel bikes have been 142 by 12 and 100 by 12 for the last 2 or 3 years.
We're talking about the actual width and how it fits the four.
No one has really put out anything that's anywhere near an acceptable change in years for that. So it's pretty well set. This is what
for now at least.
Axle spacing will be for rim, or for road bike, gravel bike, and then in the mountain bike world, boost spacing is the most common by far.
And it's on my e-bike.
And
So when the e-bike came, I went, I've got an Austin set of carbon wheels I'll use with it. And then I went, oops, it's boost.
And there's a lot of brands, especially in some of the higher end carbon stuff, that are doing lifetime crash replacement.
Yeah.
So when you're buying this, this wheel for this bike for this extended period of time, actually it makes a lot of sense now.
Well, and yes, and that's the thing is everyone thinks carbon. Now the fact is we know from the F1 world, carbon is incredibly strong.
Beautiful.
It can be super stiff or it can be very flexible. Everyone thinks carbon wheels are just going to explode. Now, do they break? Yes.
Yep.
We do get broken ones that come in. So having that crash replacement is a huge thing. However, is it something that you'd be worried about right now?
I have been riding carbon rims almost exclusively for the past 6 or 7 years.
Well, I mean, since they're so fragile, obviously you can't mountain bike on them.
Yeah, I have bashed those against numerous rocks and they haven't broken. So.
Yeah, so matter of fact, Danny McCaskill, my favorite man, he did a wonderful wheel where he was jumping off a set of stairs and he was slamming that carbon wheel to the point of failure, and that thing was more durable than I ever thought.
So yeah, that was a Santa Cruz ad that Danny did for their reserve wheels.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was talking about
Look it up.
Basically how durable their rims are for impact resistance. And so yeah, he was sending a stair set. It was an 8 or 10 stairs. It was not small, without a tire.
Yeah.
So it was the wheel. It was the it looked like this, where it was just going to send it, and it didn't. I mean, it broke, but it's one of those things where it
took more abuse than you
showed
think.
that he was still able to ride the wheel after sending that, after dropping that just on the rim, which is an absurd use. But it's something where to kind of talk about how robust this stuff is.
Right.
I feel better about impact resistance from riding with carbon is stronger from what I understand than aluminum at this point, because aluminum's going to bend.
Sure.
Carbon can be engineered to be super rigid and then compress enough and bounce right back. So
I like it on mountain just for the vibration control, shaking and jostling. Carbon feels really, really good. But I guess the one thing that we talked about repurposing or custom building wheels. Where can you cut corners? Let's say if you're going to get an alloy rim, and the reason I say that is some things are not reusable. How much are we looking for an actual alloy hoop?
The rim itself. So you'll have prices range from $40 to $180.
What about carbon?
Carbon usually starts at around $300 per rim, and then up from there. Yeah, and so there's such a wide range of.
So can you reuse a hub if you're doing a new set of wheels? Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why. So when I've built wheels, especially for myself, early on, I talked about investing in your hub. Your hub is something where that's going to be the more durable part that's going to last longer, and so you can put different rims on different hubs, but that hub's still going to be the same. So yeah, you can if you go to a nicer hub, a little bit higher end hub, it's going to be a more solid wheel.
Well, and the reason I went down this rabbit hole, which you can tell all of wheel building can be, is when you buy really fine, nice things, Chris King hubs, and then you'll have somebody who buys beautiful carbon rims, and we're going to lace it all up, and they go, I want to save money, I have these used spokes.
Yeah. So yeah, used
it makes my
spokes
brain
are,
stop.
Well, it's ones where.
Would you do it? Go ahead and tell them. I'll answer that phone.
If I have to. So yeah, I don't like to reuse spokes, especially with a new wheel or new spokes that don't have any stress on any tension torque on them. So it's safer. It's better. It's more consistent. At the same time, yeah, if that's the place, it's probably the best place if you need to reuse something. But use new spoke nipples, please. And so yeah, in that kind of wheel build conversation, everything that kind of goes into it is a huge part. So getting the right hub, the right spokes, the right rim, and the right lacing pattern, spoke count, all of those things need to be set and solid to put together what is going to be the best wheel for you. What else do you have on here? Yeah, don't recommend using old spokes. So spokes as you ride, they are taking that. Okay, why we don't reuse spokes? Why we don't like to? As you're riding that wheel, it is it's stressed, it's torqued, it's tension, it's taking that brunt, and it is kind of keeping that hub, keeping you floating inside that wheel. And so as that spoke gets set in that way, is the moment that we are to take it out of the hub, put it back in, and it's going to be bent and forced in a different direction. Those are those wear points could have started to age over time and be less flexible, more rigid. And so the chance of that spoke breaking under that torque, that new and changed torque, is a lot greater. So yeah, having a new spoke with a new wheel obviously makes a lot of sense, and it's highly recommended. Yeah, and also a lot of times when we're making these changes, if we're going from this hub to that hub or this rim to that rim, spoke lengths change. And so when you're buying spokes and you're setting spokes for a wheel, you have spoke calculators that are doing trigonometry to measure exactly how long that spoke needs to be. And so when that point needs to be, as opposed to 291 millimeters, and it needs to be 293 millimeters, that 2 millimeters is actually quite a big deal. And if you're trying to reuse an old spoke, that can cause significant issues. Yeah, we haven't even talked about spoke nipples yet. It's just another part.
Fully functional bike shop.
Are we going to do a hour-long class just on spoke nipples?
Could
solely on that.
So, and that's the thing. So I know what you mentioned earlier. There's different types of spokes. We went over that. But yeah, spoke nipples themselves.
Nipples are a whole nother thing.
Do you reuse nipples?
No.
No. I
mean,
said don't skimp on the cheap stuff. Was my point.
They're like a nickel a piece. They're not a big deal.
It's like if you're going to get something, don't skimp on the cheapest part for sure.
Yeah. And so one of the big things about spoke nipples that actually does come into play more commonly, most recently about wheels, is that you have two different materials realistically for spoke nipples. You have aluminum and you have brass, which is weird to say brass. I feel like brass is not really used anywhere else. But yeah, brass spoke nipples are a very common thing. But so aluminum are lighter, brass are more durable, more robust. And so there were a lot of companies, especially around 2012 to 2015, that were using aluminum spoke nipples in their mountain bike rims that everyone ran tubeless. Aluminum corrodes with ammonia, and most of the sealants that everyone was using back then were ammonia-based. So you have a lot of wheels at this point.
Chemistry.
Just based on chemistry and timeline, the spokes will just start to fail.
Yeah.
All the spoke nipples will be breaking. You open up that rim, and there's just a white cloud of corroded. And I'm not in chemistry anymore, but the aluminum and the ammonia group, I'm not exactly sure.
We'll diagram it.
It's probably aluminum oxide is what I have to assume that it is. So that oxygen group comes over and tears that apart. But that's what happens. So you'll have these wheels that have been ridden, that have been solid, and then all the spokes start breaking. And then what you have to do is just rebuild the entire wheel, brand new spoke nipples. And then all of us are putting brass nipples in once we do that, because it's okay to have a 10-gram heavier wheel when it doesn't break every 5 years. Almost like clockwork.
Well, and I guess that's the thing too, is if you're into cycling, say you just bought a hybrid locally, and a lot of people want to maybe rebuild wheels that break, but if they're entry-level wheels, my advice, just buy a replacement wheel, $100, $200. But I would say almost everyone will benefit from a custom-built wheel that is purpose-built to exactly what you're doing. And then you might have several sets of wheels that are purpose-built for everything you get into. It's a deep hole, it's N+1. But here's the thing I'd say is when you look at a bike, there's a lot of things you can customize. Wheels are the tuner option. That is where you can really play. You can feel the speed. You can make the changes.
Well, so you and I have always talked with, I would much rather ride a garbage frame with really nice wheels than a really nice frame with garbage wheels.
Yes,
and absolutely. It makes such a difference in how the bike rides. It is so much more the character of what you're riding, so much more, feel and like live, action out of it. So yeah, wheels make a huge difference.
So I'd say, yeah, you can do a custom wheel. I don't care what you're riding, do it. Any other thoughts you had today?
I had one and I totally lost it. It's just, it's so much nerdery.
Well, here's what I would say, guys. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Thursdays are the day we're going to be doing this. In the future, we'll also be doing some live podcast stuff as well. Keep an eye on our YouTube for new videos, our TikTok, Instagram, where we do a lot of shorts as well as DIY and tips. You can find us at Crank Revolution almost everywhere. Remember to go back to that old podcast on the audio play, the first 20 episodes, because we're coming back. Any final thoughts?
No, thanks for coming out.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next Thursday.